Okay, so we are recording now. Our topic for this month is change management. And I think it's such an important topic because we all go through change within ourselves, but within our organizations. And change is a challenge. And one of the things to understand when we're talking about change is that it's a process, not a switch. And what I see being a big problem within companies is that they make it a switch, not a process. So, hey, we have this new software starting next week. You're all going to use it. That's a switch and it doesn't work. And so anything can be a change when we're looking at change management. It can be something as simple as a software change to new people coming on your team to your leadership changing. Like it can be anything that will have an impact on your team and on yourself is a change. And we ignore it often. And what happens when we ignore it is that then we want to go back to our old ways. So what I want to talk about when we're talking about change management is that there is a 70% failure rate in change management. That is a huge statistic. What that means is that companies don't do it properly. They don't make the change stick. They don't make the change last because they're not really thinking about how do we as a company ensure the long-term objective of this change. So when I see companies coming together like mergers and acquisitions, that two companies will come together and they will have the best of intentions that they're going to have a meeting, they're going to present the whole new structure, and then 3 months later they're going to go back to being two siloed organizations, or they're going to go back to using the original software because the new software didn't work, or they're going to be unhappy because they don't like who they're reporting to on their team now because they have a new boss. So all of these things cause like failure to happen within change management because there's a way to do change that's really helpful and lasting. And there's most of the time we don't do it right within companies. I saw another statistic that there was like 85% of mergers and acquisitions fail in how they integrate the companies together. So it can be a really big issue. But what I wanted to talk about first is when we're looking at change, it really starts with having some self-awareness. So here's a little story I'll share with you that I love. Often, there are people who love going on roller coaster rides. So I want you to think about yourself. Like, do you love going on roller coaster rides? This group of people is the one that gets to the park as soon as it opens in the morning. They are the first ones in. They love that roller coaster. They are riding it high. They'll go on the craziest, scariest roller coasters and say, whoa, what a thrill. Love it. You know, the ones that go up and go in loops and spin down. And then when they get off the roller coaster, they're first in line to do it again. So that's the first group, the lovers of the roller coasters. Then you have the second group. The second group of roller coaster riders are I don't mind going on roller coasters and I like to go along with the lovers who love to ride. So I'm going to go with you. And I don't hate it. I don't love it, but I'll go. I don't need to be first in line. I can sleep in that morning. They'll take the roller coaster, they'll ride it up, click, 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 and then they'll spin around and then, okay, they're all good. And they're not going to run back in line to do it all over again. That's your second group. And then you have the third group, the ones like me who are like, let me tell you about roller coasters. I'm not getting on it. You know why? Because I heard that they don't really do all their safety checks properly. You don't know that they've screwed in every single bolt tightly enough. And no, I don't. You really want me to go? Okay, I'll go with you. But I'm just letting you know that I do not like roller coasters. And I will go on my roller coaster and I will go click, 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 click up. I will spin around. I will hold my breath and clench my fists the whole time. And then I will stick my head in a bucket when I get down and not ever want to go on another roller coaster for the rest of my life. So I often think about change management like this. You have people that love change. Most of them are the entrepreneurs or presidents of companies. They haven't even finished with one change when they're looking at the next acquisition. They're looking at the next big move, whatever it is. They love it. Then you have like the manager level who go along with the change and will, hang out with the change lovers, but not really want to do it every single time. It's a lot. And then you have the people like me who would much rather just have their feet on the ground and not, can we just keep everything like status quo? And the reason I bring this up is it's good to understand yourself in terms of how you are affected by change, what you think about, Because if you are in a position of leadership and you have to lead others, it's good to understand where are they on that change spectrum. Do they love the roller coaster or hate the roller coaster? So that you can work with them and coach them through any kind of change. So you know it's coming, but you don't always, love it. And not everybody on your team loves it either. So I have a video of one of the world's craziest roller coaster rides. Would you like to see it? Okay, I actually have to turn the sound on, I believe. So hold on one second. I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to turn the sound on. And I will take you on a roller coaster ride. So there you go. So just really quickly before I get into the rest of the presentation, in the chat box, how many roller coaster riders do we have here who love roller coaster rides? Marilyn, I know you're a coaster gal. Brenda, I know you hate them. So I think when you think about your team though, and any change that you've ever gone through, think about, can you identify those people on your team and what they think about any kind of change management? So that's the other piece of it. It's not just from yourself, your own perspective, but how others on your team think about change. So good to know. 100% of any outcome for any kind of change is really dependent on that individual on your team and shifting that mindset. So understanding that if I have somebody on my team that hates change, and these are the people that say, we've tried this before and it didn't work. Have you heard that before? Or I don't have capacity, I don't have time, I don't have enough members on my team. You're going to hear clues when you're presenting any kind of change as to reluctance to make any change. And it really is from a perspective of leadership, coaching and training your team around how to achieve a really good mindset and adapt and adopt to change. Resistance is going to be your biggest challenge you're ever going to face when you're dealing with change. And again, your executive team or your leadership is going to say, hey, we're going to take the company in a new direction, or we want you to hit this number, this quota moving forward. And everybody on the team is going to start grumbling, that's a ridiculous number, we're never going to be able to achieve that. That's your clue to jump in and say, okay, I can let this fester, or I can say, oh, I understand this is a mindset issue, or this is resistance, and I have to use with this knowledge that it's resistance and not make it an obstacle. I have to walk them through how we're going to do this and how they can shift their mindset around it and understand why it's necessary that we make this change. And that is the key to making change effective is to really explain the why. And the reason for change being so difficult for some people, and especially for those in the mid-level management positions who are the ones that have to execute on all of these decisions, is because our brains don't like to do anything that is not familiar. Anything that comes in that's really new, we automatically perceive it as a threat. Like, how is that going to affect how late I have to work? How is that going to affect how much I don't know and how much I'm going to have to learn? Like, what is that going to happen? How is that going to impact me? Is what we think about when we think about change. And our brains automatically think of it as a threat because it's something new. Anytime we get something new that's a little bit scary, that's threat time. We're going to be worried about that. Our brain likes the status quo. We always like take the same route to work typically, right? We know how to get from point A to point B. And I'm very rarely going to have to take a detour. And what happens when I take a detour? I'm pissed off. Shoot, I have to take a detour? That sucks. Or there's, they close the road. Actually, this happened to me. They closed the road that I love to take to get home. And it pissed me off. It threw me off my game completely because I like the route that I always take. And when I took this new route, it took a while for me to really understand the best way to go. And then I realized I really liked that new route, but it took me like, a month. So we like the status quo. We always are going to go back to what we already know. That's why when you have to implement any kind of change, I'm going to use software as an example because I see this happening a lot. You'll often see people going back to the old way of doing things because they knew how to do that. They were able to do that and it was easier for them. We don't like surprises. A lot of people love the roller coasters, but a lot of people don't like those surprises, and the surprises cause them to go into threat mode. And the biggest obstacle and the biggest area of resistance when we're looking at change management is fear of failure, not just for yourself, but for those members on your team who want to do a good job. But if they don't feel like they have the ability to do it, then they're going to fail. Then they don't want to do it because they want to be successful in their work and not feel like a failure. And anytime that you're introducing something new, there's that element of, well, if I don't know how to do it, am I going to be as effective at my job, or am I going to be a failure? So that's some of the key reasons why we don't like change, or members of our teams don't like change. Then there's neuroscience behind it, which is really fascinating. One is that our brain is going to scan for threats 5 times more than rewards. So when you think about this, again, as a leader, you have to really amplify how often you are rewarding your team members because they are looking for threats all the time. So how are you going to build a reward system into any change management procedure that you're doing? Because they're always looking for the threats, the obstacles. When change happens, that threat response, like I said, skyrockets, and your brain produces a lot of cortisol. That's a stress hormone. And what's important to understand here, and we talked about this with time management last time, is that when we have too much cortisol and adrenaline from that stress, we go into fight, flight, freeze, and appease. So fight means I'm going to fight you on this. I think this is a bad idea. We can't get behind this change. The team doesn't want to do it. That's the fight. Flight means I'm going to quit because I can't do this job. Right? That's the literal sense of flight. Freeze is I'm just not going to do it. And appease is I'm going to give in and do it, but I'm going to give you my bare minimum. And it's not because they don't want to. Okay. It's just because the stress is so great that's causing them to react like this. And that's why it's so important to have that self-awareness, awareness of self, awareness of others in how you address any kind of change within your organization. I have seen this happen with coffee. When they changed the coffee at this law firm, there was like a revolt, okay? All change has impact, and that's the important to understand. And one of the things that you really want to minimize within your organizations is that when there's a negativity bias, the coffee sucks, they're going to let everybody know that the new coffee sucks. And then all of a sudden, the whole company is going to be, complaining about the coffee. I worked with this company. They were a European company and in the United States. And when the Europeans came to the States, literally, they were spitting the coffee out. Like, it was disgusting. So they had to buy a $5,000 coffee machine with the coffee beans from Australia to appease the leadership team and that were European leadership team. Right? Like, and I want you to reflect on what I'm saying. Like, do you see this happening within your companies, in any capacity, or in your past where you've seen change or had to implement change on your own?
Well,
so
Steph, can I interject just a mindset is probably half the companies we work with are in the middle of mergers or acquisition mode. And so people, if you've been through a merger and acquisition, people misbehave so badly and they can't even help it. They can't help their resistance. Another place you might see it is if you're hired or brought in as the change manager of like, we love your whole model and we want you to implement this here in our company. And then, you get the signing bonus, and then you come on the team and everybody fights you and resists you. And then the executives don't necessarily stand up for you because you're creating such a ruckus with the change because of their natural resistance.
Exactly. Exactly. That was perfectly said, Brenda. Exactly. So when we take a look at the model that you see in front of you, you see it says comfort in the middle, then discomfort, and then panic. This is a really good model to use when we're looking at any kind of change. Comfort is what we do every day. I know how to get from here to my house. I'm comfortable with that routine. Please don't upset my routine. I know people that love to come into the office, have coffee and oatmeal every morning. If the microwave isn't working, their routine is thrown off and the whole day is ruined, right? So I like my routine. Now, when I'm introducing a change to say, hey, we have to do sales differently now, as an example. So we're going to train you in a new sales technique. Well, I've always done sales one way. Now you're teaching me another way to do it. I'm very uncomfortable with that. Discomfort is fine. See, the color is green. Discomfort is totally fine. Discomfort is where the change and the growth and the learning happens. But if I go from comfort and I say, starting tomorrow, I need you to do this whole new sales technique. Well, that's going to cause people to panic because they're not comfortable, right? You now know the neuroscience behind it. You know that if I don't feel like I know what I'm doing, that's a threat to my ability to do a great job. I'm going to just go back to doing what I've always done. I'm going to go back to the area where I know I'm good at sales. So why do I have to do it this way? So what you don't want is when you're doing change to go from comfort to panic. And comfort to panic means that you're explaining the why behind what you're doing. You're not training your team properly. You're not making sure they have all the ability and the tools to do what you're asking them to do. So what you want to make sure of is that they sit in discomfort, but not on the edge of panic. Because when you see them going back to their old ways, that's typically the heightened threat response. Okay. So that's a visual to use when we're looking at change management. The most important tools 100% of the time is your communication. Your communication is the most important part of change management, bar none. And these are the top 3 questions I was taught through ProSci, which is like the change management company experts on change management. And they say these are the top 3 things you have to address as a leader. And it doesn't matter what the change is, even if it's the coffee. Why are we changing? Why are we changing now? And what happens if we don't? This is a message that you have to continually share over and over and over again. One and done doesn't work with change management. That's why you have a 75% failure rate. Why are we changing? We're changing the coffee because we want to be more sustainable or whatever it is, right? Why are we doing it now? And what if we don't? If you can answer these questions, then you're going to answer a lot of those insecurities that people have around change. And then you have to build it up. You have to keep sharing this message. So the model for change that I want to share with you today is the ADKAR model. And this does come from ProSci.
Questions?
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interject. I hope that's okay.
Yeah.
That's before the change occurs, right? Are there questions that need to be asked and like follow through that needs to occur after the change occurs or like during it? Because I feel like that's almost like the hardest time period to manage the conversation.
It's the constant support.
That's right. This is a constant. So it's not just like I said, it's not just a one and done, but the first part of it is definitely having the awareness. And we're going to walk through the model. I think that it's a really, really important question that you asked. So what I would say is use this model when you're going through any kind of change management. The first piece of it is awareness. Why do we have to change? Everything was going fine before. Why do we have to change? As a leader, you have to answer that question. And again, you're going to have to answer that question often so that the gossip doesn't start. The next piece of it, so that's awareness. Why are we changing? Why are we changing now? What happens if we don't? Doing surveys, getting input, all of these things you want to do in advance of any of your change. Then the desire. You as a leader have to really create the desire. We're doing this because it's going to make your jobs easier. We're doing it because it's really good for the environment. And so you want to get people involved and engaged to really want to be part of the change. That's a really key to making change stick. The third piece of it is knowledge. Knowledge is simply training. I'm going to train you on how to do this change. But here's the key. I can train you all day long, but if you don't have the ability or the faith in yourself or the trust in yourself, you might not do it. So when you see that a change isn't going through and you've already delivered the training, the answer might be they might not feel confident, or they might not, you might need to handhold a little bit here to make sure that everybody is like on board with how to do it, or the training might not have been very good either. So there might be gaps in terms of knowledge and ability that you're looking at. And then reinforcement. Reinforcement is, how am I going to reward this behavior? So this is what the model is that you really want to go through anytime you're doing change management. Why are we doing this now? People want to, how do I get them to want to make this change? Am I training them, and can they do it? And then where is that resistance? Can I figure out where in this model there's resistance? And once we eliminate that and we're starting to do it, how do I reinforce it and reward the change? That's the model that we use. Yeah. Is there a question, Emmy?
Yeah, when you mention awarding these changes for reinforcement, what type of awards are you thinking of?
So it could be anything from, and this is where, you want to understand what motivates your team. It could be anything from a day off. It could be an atta girl. It could be just basic recognition. It could be a pizza party. It could be anything.
And psychologically, we say reinforce the behavior you want repeated. So point out when somebody was resistant and is now accepting change, you can acknowledge that. And that is a way of rewarding as well.
Exactly. And I think that's always a good question to ask your team. Like, how do we like to be rewarded? These are good questions that you can ask of your team as well.
And I think you can also be really clear with people. Transparency is really thrown around, and maybe you're limited on how much transparency you can offer your team because of some company culture thing. But you can also be transparent about what you can share and what you can't. And offering as much transparency as you can tends to lower that cortisol. And the other thing is that sometimes with your super duper resistors, especially if they're very high quality, giving them a quiet secret heads up can be really helpful, right? So they don't fight you in public.
That's a really good point. I never thought of that. And I thank you for sharing that. That's a really good point. Okay. So this is a tool that it's so basic. It's so rudimentary. It's so black and white, literally, right? It's just a great tool. So you have a scale here of 1 to 3. And when you're going through any kind of change, what you want to do is you want to say, on a scale of 1 to 3, how well are we doing with giving awareness to what's going on? On a scale of 1 to 3, but what's the desire level? What's the knowledge? What's the ability? What's the reinforcement? And if you're falling low, right? If 1 is bad and you're at a 1, well, now you know where to focus your attention. It's so basic, it's so simple, but it just gives you some clarity in terms of where you need to focus your attention. So I use this all the time, and I'm happy to share it with anybody afterwards as well, send it out. But that's what I use.
It's being recorded. Hey, Steph, on desire, is desire building the desire for the change?
It's explaining, yes, it is building the desire for the change, building the appetite for the change, getting them on board with the why. Like, this is going to help you save time. It's going to, if I'm going to save time, I'm going to have desire because now I get to spend more time in my personal life with those that are special to me. That's meaningful.
And then the knowledge is the why. Sorry.
The training.
Yeah.
The training.
And then the ability is, can I implement this new software?
Yeah. Can you use it? Okay. Like, here's Zoom, use Zoom. I've never used Zoom before. Well, I gave you the training. Well, that wasn't enough. I need somebody to answer questions while I'm using it, right? Like, I don't know how. So that's the ability piece of it. And then the reinforcement. Any other questions before I move on? I love all the questions. It's good. Okay. So that's the ADKAR model. And then I'm just going to share a short story with you before we go into a breakout. But a couple of 2 years ago, I was on this cruise. It was a gorgeous, like Royal Caribbean cruise on one of the biggest cruise ships in the world. And um, the pilot gets on, the captain, I should say. And actually, this happened. First thing that happened was I felt that the ship was turning. And I was like, I said to my husband, like, I think the ship is turning. And he's like, is it really? It's a really big ship. And then all of a sudden I saw people jump up literally and walk to the rails and look overboard. And I'm like, what are we looking for? So of course I followed along with everybody else and I'm looking overboard, like, what are we looking for? And I had no idea. So I'm just looking. I thought maybe there was a whale or something or something like that. And a bartender's next to me says, did you see anything? And I'm like, I don't know what I'm looking for. And he goes, oh, did you hear the announcement? And I said, what announcement? And then 2 seconds later, this announcement goes on, Oscar, Oscar, Oscar. What the heck is Oscar, Oscar, Oscar? And people are looking. So I'm like, what does that even mean? And he said, oh, it means man overboard. Man overboard. Oh my God, that's crazy. So I'm looking now, and I don't even know what I'm looking for, but I'm hearing that. And the captain gets on and says, ladies and gentlemen, you may have noticed that the cruise ship is turning. We have heard from 2 passengers on the ship that there are that they saw 2 people in the water, or what we think are 2 people in the water, and marine law dictates that we have to go around and see what happened and try to do a search and rescue. So we are now on a search and rescue mission. Oh my God. Okay. And then 2 minutes later, the captain gets on and says, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, you are going to see in the air, you're going to see Coast Guard, you're going to see in the water Coast Guard. They're going to be circling around and we're all going to be looking for this boat. Okay. And then I hear from one of the passengers, I heard that it was a woman who jumped in after her 3-year-old who fell out of the ship, off the ship. Oh my God. And then I like walked to another area and so I heard somebody say, I heard that there was this guy that committed suicide. He was like so sad. He was with his family and he jumped and that's what it was. And somebody went after him. Oh my God. And then I heard somebody else say, I heard that it was like this group of drunk teenagers who jumped over. And then 2 minutes later, the captain gets on again and he goes, ladies and gentlemen, I want to let you know that we don't know who it is. We have counted everybody on the ship and everybody is accounted for. So we don't know who it is, but here's what we want you to do. We want you to be part of this search and rescue mission. So please, everybody look on all sides of the ship. If you see anything, say something. Okay, great. And so then we're all looking, right? We're all doing something. And then 5 minutes later, the captain gets on again and says, ladies and gentlemen, I want to let you know that we have found the 2 people. They were not on this ship. And he said, if you take a look to your left, you'll see Cuba. And that's all he said. Right? We could fill in the blanks from that. And he said, the search and rescue team have got them. They're okay. And now we're going to continue with our cruise. And everybody, thank you for participating. So one of the reasons why I love this story is this captain was able to turn this big ship around and do the whole search and rescue thing. But he got every single passenger. There were 5,000 passengers on board with the desire to help in this mission. Everybody was looking. Everybody was part of it. He also stopped any rumors. I don't know how he heard it. I don't know what they did, but they had a system that there are no rumors on this ship. That's for sure. He ran a tight ship. So whatever was happening, he stopped that right away. And he communicated the whole time. And we all had a role to play. And we knew what it was. After nobody knew what the heck Oscar, Oscar, Oscar was, then he explained what it was and what our roles were. So this was a super little tiny snapshot of a really good, effective change. So I thought I'd share that story with you because it really starts with communication. Like, why are we turning the ship around? Why are we doing it now? And what happens if we don't? So there you have my life example.
And I love that he stopped the panic with his communication. I'm going to stop recording. If you missed today's meeting and you're in the recording, you're going to miss the breakout session, but at least you'll have this part.